welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who puts the lime in the coconut and shakes it all up.
Tim Longo.
Hey, shake it all up.
Nice.
Everybody wants warmer climes this time of year, so I was hoping I would put you in mind of a beach.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind the winter, fall and winter.
Yeah, it's not so bad in the West Coast.
Yeah, I guess not.
It was we had a frost here last night, so it's a little bit chillier here in Maryland. A little below freezing when I got up this morning. So I would prefer to be there, or someplace where I could put some lime and some coconut. We are not here to discuss an old game today. We're actually doing a sort of a bonus content. It's going to be our regular episode for this week, but it's American Thanksgiving this week, and so we are not embarking on a new game until we are past that.
Holiday bonus.
Holiday bonus. Yeah, I think I'll mark it as a bonus content. But we wanted to give you a little bit of something, and so we've looked at Shinji Mikami's latest game, The Evil Within. What'd you think about this one, Tim?
I was actually happily surprised. I remember hearing the buzz when it came out and kind of mixed reviews and such. I was just general chatter on podcasts and stuff. I didn't read any reviews specifically, but I don't even think I've looked at the Metacritic. But I kind of, so I went in pretty, medium expectations or what have you, and just for the academic aspect of the podcast, and I played the first 3 chapters. Is that how far you played too?
I believe so, yeah, or maybe a little bit into the 4th chapter.
Yeah. So you got through the village with
yes.
the chainsaw guy.
Yes.
And despite all of the tropes...
I may actually have played all of 4 then, because I definitely played 1 chapter past that, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just got through the gate with the chainsaw, so technically starting chapter 4 now. Despite all the tropes that are pretty darn apparent, and it is very interesting. I think it was good that we played this one as a partner to Resident Evil, because it's really interesting to see the beginning and the end. You know what I mean? Like, right. Not the end, but the beginning and the most recent.
The current state. Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about RE4 along the way as well, and you kind of see that's sort of the missing link, I think, that we talked a little bit about, but we're not playing. So for those who haven't played RE4, I'd suggest it if you're interested in sort of the historical aspect of the survival horror, because that's, I think, the bridging the gap to modern survival horror was really that game.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely accurate. I mean, including some of the tropes that you mentioned, like, this feels very much like Resident Evil 4 crossed with some of the things I like in Silent Hill games.
There's even a little Tomb Raider stuff in here.
Yeah, that's true.
With some of the crafting of stuff and the opening hanging upside down cracked me up personally. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, the muck and the sort of slide sequence that they have.
It's very much more a sort of action horror game, I think.
Yeah.
It gets away from things that are a little bit more ponderous about the original. You're not checking a map, and you're not expecting you're going to go back. You're just kind of going pell-mell through this horror adventure, and there's also just not a lot of puzzles, really, and not. It's interesting. I look at it and it's very intricate. It's an idTech 5 game. So
that's what I was going to ask you. Which engine they used? Yeah,
it's basically Rage and Doom.
Yeah.
Sort of level. Doom.
It looks okay.
It looks great.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought about a lot, given how good it looks, though, is I miss like the text that describes things in the original Resident Evil, where you walk up to a wall and you get you get you look at a picture or whatever, and it describes what the picture is. Yeah. And because you can actually see that in full fidelity here, it does it very little, if at all.
Yeah.
And so you kind of lose some of the unsettling aspects that I thought that was really good at in Resident Evil. I mean, your imagination is going to do a lot more with those words than they're going to do with an image, and so especially if they apply psychological adjectives rather than straight description, because a lot of them do. They kind of give you a sense of unease, and this kind of loses out on that. And I, as a person who reads a lot, I also kind of miss that. Like, I very naturally fall into a readable fiction less than I do a visible one. So
yeah, we talked about that a little bit, but I mean, it's an interesting point, because I'm trying to think of another modern game that would still do that right now, and nobody does that anymore. This must be
not when you look around in the world, but I mean, something like Uncharted actually has descriptions of all the things you pick up.
Yeah, and definitely
the treasures and things like that. There's tons of stuff that happens. Yeah, in the sort of UI screens, you go to like Far Cry's the same way, Assassin's Creed is the same way. Yeah, but it's very rare to have
with the environment. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, in level, right? In situ, to have something say, "Oh, you use this thing, and this is what you see."
Kind of the classic adventure game merged with, which we talked about legacy-wise, kind of the RE1 probably having some adventure game.
Technology and lineage for sure. Yeah, definitely. So I do kind of miss that.
Yeah,
and I also find the gore. I don't know. It's at a certain point it becomes so ubiquitous.
Yeah,
that it doesn't inspire any kind of fear. It's just kind of gross. Because everything's so dirty, and gritty and disgusting.
Yeah.
After this level, you're going to go after level 3. At some point, you get back to the hospital.
Yeah, I figured.
And we should talk about the hospital stuff with the nurse, because that's kind of an interesting thing. That's where I think it gets into Silent Hill territory.
Yeah, it feels like a mashup of a bunch of things. There's definitely what little I know of Silent Hill, because I haven't played a Silent Hill game. But some Tomb Raider. There's definitely.
There's some Alien Isolation, like you hide.
Yeah, it's stealthier than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, me too.
Which I think it does an okay job at the stealth. I think that the sort of the little eye icon mechanic leaves. It's just not as thorough and kind of robust as, say, I put in my notes. I compared it to Hitman. The new Hitman, which.
Right.
Kind of call back to another kind of like playing a modern version of an older game that we played on the podcast with Hitman 2, but the modern Hitman just nails stealth. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it's a really high bar. So this is kind of the most basic and sometimes unclear version of that kind of stuff.
It reminds me a lot of down to the iconography. It looks a lot like a Bethesda game.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you stealth in Bethesda, they have a closed eye and they have an open eye, and that's basically what's going on here. You can do a little bit more pattern, like patrol recognition. Oh, I can see where this thing's going. You can do so. There is some good sort of stealth stuff from that.
The one thing I will say, though, that I think we talked about with Ari maybe a little bit too, because we brought up Alien Isolation, which I still haven't played and really want to play after playing this, but the merger of stealth and survival horror, I think, is actually a good combo that I hadn't anticipated. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like you really RE4, there wasn't really anything like that, and the tension that you build up between the two of them, like even after we had finished, playing RE1, there are multiple times when I really wish that there actually was a stealth mechanic, Yeah. You had other options from that perspective to actually interact with the enemies, and this does it. I mean, sneaking up behind enemies is cool. He brings the burning mechanic back, of course, and uses it as a resource.
Yeah, and as a weapon too. You can you can get torches, and you can use the stupidity of some of the enemies against them, because there's like piles of hay that you can light on fire that they'll.
Yep.
If you time it right, they'll run right into it, and so there's a lot of. I love the fire stuff. Actually, That is one of
Fire's
my favorite.
cool, yep.
Yeah, one of my favorite things.
Yep. Good.
One
good
thing that was
effect.
weird with the weapons, though, is I kept finding ammo for the crossbow.
Yeah.
Before I found the crossbow.
Yeah. I noticed that too.
And I guess the only justification I could make to myself about that was to sort of point out that you're going to find different types of ammo, and to make that kind of more of a big deal. Like, so before you even get to the weapon itself, it's like, oh, I already have 2 different types of ammo. Like, that's very unusual, right? I mean, that's, unusual that I'm getting the ammo first, and then eventually you get taught, you get the crossbow, and you get taught that you can use the crafting resource, basically. So it gives you a reason why you've been going after these traps. A lot of that feels very cart before the horse.
Well,
in a lot of ways. Like, it's like, I don't even know why I'm getting the stuff that I'm gonna, like, you basically know that you might be able to craft with it because you get a resource out of it, but you don't know what it's for, and you do several of those things. There's different types. The bombs I never get, and so I'm always getting blown up, and then lots of zombies are running at me from those. For some reason I cannot get that timing quite right. I've gotten a couple of them, but usually not. I even opened a chest once, and it kind of slowly opens, and you can see there's a bomb under there, and I didn't realize you could just stop.
Yeah, they train you to do it slowly, and then you can disarm it. Yeah, I haven't missed one of those. Not only that, but I mean, when they train you on disarming traps, and you get that resource from the traps, they mention the agony crossbow in the description. Right. So they give it away.
Yeah, they tell you, oh, hey, this is for you. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you finally find it, it's tucked away in the corner of this, random building. So it's a little anticlimactic.
Well, there's more than one place to get it.
Oh, really?
Yes, there's like these suitcases, and if you've already found it, I think you have an opportunity just to get more ammo when you find it again. So you just get whatever.
Okay, so maybe I found a later one.
You may have found a different one from the one I found. Like, there was one in the chainsaw guy level, the level 3.
Yeah, that's where I got mine.
That's where you found it. Okay, yeah. And there's at least one in there, and I think there might be 2.
Well, that's how I took him out too, as well.
Yeah, me too. Exploding. Exploding
whatever.
Exploding crossbow bolt for the win.
In my panic, he was running at me, and I shot him with the exploding one, and it just blew up on both of us. But luckily, I didn't die. So, it was a classic survival horror moment where you're just spazzing. Quick, oh my God, which one? And I don't even know if I had intended to shoot him with that thing.
Well, it's always scary to be pursued by a man with a chainsaw.
Well, and so, we were talking pre-show.
In art as in life.
The trope, exactly. The tropes, the Mikami tropes are dense. I almost feel like... not to make commentary on his, on him leaving Capcom, but I feel like this is sort of like his, like, all of his desires. I feel like all the things he wanted to do at Capcom, but they never let him do or something. He just is putting them all in one game, and sometimes. Like, I feel like it's such a mashup of a bunch of different things that don't necessarily always go together, but you have a little bit of RE4 in here, a little bit of RE1, there's even a little Dead Rising stuff in there, and it's just a little, like, Identity Crisis kind of coming through for me.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's way more of an empowerment fantasy, for example. Yeah. But there's stealth, right? I mean, so it's like, you've got kind of multiple things working against each other there. And even playing, I know I recommended you play it on easy, which is what I switched to after I had played a part of a level like 5 times and kept getting it killed. And I was just like, you know what? I don't need this in my life.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty difficult, even at easy. More so than I expected.
I've died a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, that chainsaw guy got me once. That's for sure.
Well, and I'm having, like, it feels like a bigger, like I'm only through chapter 3, like we said, but it feels like a bigger story than some of the RE stuff. Like, with the whole city thing that happens, and there's so many facets going on in the story. It seems like with insanity stuff, and then there's the hospital, and then there's these missing characters, and then there's the serial killer. Which prediction? You're the serial killer. I'm just saying it right now.
Yeah, that does not seem all that unlikely to me. There is definitely, I mean, like I said, this has, from that aspect, a real Silent Hills feel, where it feels like we're literally inside somebody's brain or something.
Yeah.
Because of all the different ways it jumps around, in
It's
ways that
schizophrenic.
seem impossible. Like, just that
Yeah.
make no, And I always kind of add a Japanese factor for stuff like that, because it's like Japanese games often just do crazy things where you're like, that makes no logical sense, and yet in this sort of amped up reality that they make, it makes its own kind of sense.
Yeah,
But-
they have fun with it.
Yeah.
It seems like, yeah. But it is kind of nice to have the story kind of a little bit more epic, at least from I'm specifically talking about the scenes from the city, right, where there's just like the whole city is moving and there's just crazy stuff going on. It seems like maybe a little bit more is at stake. So the RE games typically are a little more 5, I guess, kind of expanded quite a bit, but they tend to be kind of around an area and a specific mystery that's going on. Like Raccoon City, but and I guess in this case it's Crimson City. Again, another Mikamiism, Crimson
Yeah.
City. And you work for the police department, and but you're right. There's some Silent Hill kind of stuff going in there.
Well,
sure.
and in particular, there's these mirrors that are in, these
Yeah.
locations, and it's an opportunity to go to a place where you can save your game, which is welcome. But you also keep going back to this hospital, and the hospital actually changes a little
neat.
bit over time as well. Yeah, I really like that aspect of it, because it is kind of cluing me into this being somewhat deeply psychological, and maybe this guy's just insane, and like you said, maybe everything in here is basically him in some way. But there's also this. There's musical touches there that I really love. It's like this old timey music.
Well,
little
and that's,
Bioshock, kind of feeling.
yeah. Well, but then the cue for the music is also very RE, right? Like when you get to the typewriters,
Right, exactly.
the safe rooms, you have that specific music that tells you you're safe, and so if you're hearing that music before you see the mirror, one's nearby.
Right.
And that's another good cue that he was always good at that stuff.
Yeah, and the audio is, really terrific. I mean, It probably scares me more than the visuals most of the time, because like I said, the gore kind of, you'll get to a point where you're in gory, if you continue playing, you'll get more gore, at some point. And it just, at that point for me, I start to disconnect from games that are so overwhelmingly gory, and movies. I'm not, I don't think Quentin Tarantino's latest work is his greatest, for example. And a lot of it has to do with that, where it's just so much in your face that it starts to lose, from so much application, it loses power, right? You're just kind of like, oh yeah, there you go, some more intestines, and at a certain point you kind of don't care, which is it's just a scary thing to say about such grotesque stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's, they're not to talk too specifically about some of the gore, but, if you let the chainsaw guy catch you in the very first, prologue intro thing, and what happens to you during the scene that follows.
I got through that without being caught.
Oh,
thankfully.
really?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got caught multiple. So you don't know what happens. What's, no. Okay. Well, they basically decapitate you, very, very graphically right in front of the camera. And the weird thing about it is that, and other than your point about kind of just doing it for the sake of doing it, and just kind of desensitizes you to it, but you don't. This is a brand new character that you have known nothing about. You know that you're playing as this guy, but you have no, the stakes are not high yet, and so doing
right. They've done no empathy work.
Yeah, so it's
other than a little bit at the beginning to establish him as this cop, right? I mean,
it's very minimal, but
it's totally minimal.
It makes the gore meaningless, when you do that stuff. It really just becomes a slasher flick at that point, and and it kind of bums me out. They could have been a little more artful with it, but they're going pretty heavy with it.
Because even a slasher flick, the slashing doesn't happen for at least half an hour.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Out of the 2-hour running time, if it's even that long. So it might be as much as a third of the movie before people start dying. And by then, you've already established some relationships between these characters.
And that's a key.
And otherwise, you don't care. And that's what will distinguish a good horror movie from a bad horror movie. If you look at something like, I don't know, the first Halloween movie against the second Halloween movie. The second Halloween movie is still not a bad movie, but it's nowhere near as good as the first movie. Because the second movie, you have a lot of victims who you really have they come on the screen. I'm thinking especially of like a nurse, and some orderly or something or doctor that she's having an affair with. And it's so minimal. It's like, oh, we've just found this good-looking woman that we're going to kill for you in very short order.
It's just base recognition of that stuff. Yeah, and it's the timing.
That's why people start to cheer for the killers. Right, really? Because that's the only character we have enough time with to build empathy.
Yeah.
In things like that. So.
A little forced. But
it is.
I will say some of the things that I really am some other things I'm appreciating though about it, and kind of calling back to RE4. It's a pretty methodical and slow. Like you can sprint and you can kick doors open and stuff if you want to, but you don't move very quickly, right? Enemies are pretty. I'm playing on casual as well, and enemies are still pretty tough to take down, right? So there's that. Like you said, there is more of a power fantasy than RE1 had, or maybe even RE4, I'd say. But it still has that tension. There's still a lot of that give and take of. Yeah, you can't run your way through and sprint past things very easily. And in many cases, I'm not even taking many enemies out with one headshot. Sometimes it takes two if I don't hit it quite right. And so that adds to the tension as well. So you're definitely not you're not an indestructible, power fantasy kind of character, which I'm glad that they kept that stuff. Yeah. And then the save games, you only can really save, you get checkpoints, I guess.
Right. So if you're continuing to play, you'll just go back to a certain point.
Yeah.
Which is good. I mean, I definitely appreciate that because, I think everybody's learned a lesson about, using saves as a resource and horror not necessarily being, that big a win. Yeah. That's a thing that I mean, I'm with you in that it's a fascinating choice, and you still, I still think about it. Like, is that a thing you could do, and how would you do that?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then let's see, what was that? I'm looking through my notes. Oh, I like the little, the statues that you break, and then you get the keys that you can open the morgue. Have you found those? I don't.
Oh, yes. Yeah, when you go back to the hospital.
Yeah, I don't know what statues those are. St. Francis or something. I don't know what that's.
Yes, I did find one of those, although I feel like I missed one because
I did. Yeah, I didn't think about the first one I missed, or the first one I found I didn't break. I didn't think about breaking it to get the key. But I kind of it's an interesting another general theme that I was going to mention that also is a callback to RE1 with the typewriters and such, kind of loosely, I guess, but. Everything, he's always trying to fictionalize everything. So the upgrade system, based on the green stuff you get, you go back and they kind of fictionally present you with a chair, and he's resisting, and then the next time you go in, he's not resisting as much. And
but it's like a lobby system that people used to do for games, like go into a lobby and have a physical space that you're in to do things in.
Yeah.
Destiny does that, for example. I don't know that you've played, but
yeah, I have. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So there's you go around to these different locations on the hub. I forget what it's called, but you go around to these different places in there, and it makes into a space what is normally a UI kind of interaction. So.
Yeah, MMOisms and stuff, but.
Yeah.
But it's just hilarious that he went out, and then the reason I bring it up is those keys you find, which are basically collectibles, right? That he could have just given you the collectible there on the spot, but you get these keys, and then you go back to the morgue, or you go back to the hospital, and then there's sort of like a morgue area behind the nurse's desk, and you open up these morgue doors. What are those? I guess
I think they're supposed to be lockers.
Yeah, lockers.
Like where people.
I guess so. Now I'm disappointed. I want them to be.
You want it to be. Well, it does look like a morgue.
It looks like a morgue. Yeah,
no argument. I mean, they're not like any locker I've ever used.
No, anyway, but it's kind of a neat thing that you can go back and you use these keys you find in the world, where you're going to go and upgrade and save your game, and then you get resources from. Just the concept that you can upgrade your character in a survival horror is also a big one. That's why I kind of mentioned some of the Tomb Raider stuff, because that was one of the goals that we had as well, to have a little bit of that RPG flavor in a survival situation. So you have that escalation.
Yeah,
that's good.
Well, and it's very expensive too. I felt like those feel very hard won in a way that they don't in a lot of games. A lot of games they're giving you stuff constantly, or it becomes a little overwhelming. Here I'm like, I can only buy 3 things if I buy cheap ones, and maybe 2 if I buy something more expensive.
Yeah, it's definitely.
You're very much up against the edge of like, okay, well, this might help me. You feel every choice, and that is really
that's an important.
Yeah, it's really important
for this genre. Yep.
In again, something that is a sort of disempowerment fantasy.
Yep.
So that I do actually. I like the fine line of that, of tuning that to be just enough. Now, if you missed some of those, I feel like you'd feel overwhelmed. So that's a different problem. But it does reward making sure you cover the whole map. And knowing that you're going to have to find all these things. I do wish it introduced stuff a little bit better. Like the key thing, I don't know how many I've missed, and so I don't know how screwed that's going to leave me. So stuff like that I worry a little bit about, but in general, it feels very well balanced to keep you on that knife edge of tension. And it gets weirder and weirder as it goes. You didn't find the spider lady yet.
Ooh, no! Now I'm not going to keep playing.
Well, not really a spider. No, I know, not really a spider.
Oh, that's probably Laura then. Yeah, that's
the long legs and stuff like that. That might be. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a character that chases you at one point, which is something that happens. It happens in the next level from what you've played. So I guess the 4th level, they chase you. You're in a place, and then suddenly. Like, I was trying to light a body on fire or something because I saw it there, and I was like, okay, I'll light it on fire. And they know you're going to do it. And as soon as you do it, like, 20 of them start chasing you, and you have to run. It says in some of the instruction screens, running might be your best option. And at that point, I'm like, yeah, it does. Like in loads.
Yeah, so I'm kind of mixed on that. There's been a few moments in the first 3 levels where... another note that I wrote down that we talked about during Resident Evil as well is kind of the notion that they're going to make you play the game they want you to play. And there's been some moments where I felt clever getting through certain area my own way, but then there's always going to be a trigger toward the end that causes a thing to happen that they want you to experience it in a cinematic, specific way. And as we've talked about in previous episodes of this series, I'm very mixed on that because I tend to like more systemic games where I have more control. But, there was another example, I can't think of it, maybe in the 2nd level where I felt like I was being super clever. I got past one of the big chainsaw guys, and then he burst through the door anyway, and I'm pretty sure that was a trigger, you know what I mean? And it was just everyone was going to have him burst through, and they just were forcing you to run down that hallway. I could be wrong, but some of those forced moments.
I'm sure. Yeah, no, because that was definitely what they wanted to have happen for sure.
That might have been in the
first. They want you
level,
chased by a. Yeah, it was in that sort of prologue-y area.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
The first chapter or whatever. I mean, I like some of the directions it's going. I will play more of it.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I think I'm going to play more at some point too.
I didn't. It was. I looked it up while we were talking. It was like a 75 Metacritic. I think. On the one hand, I feel like we've probably seen everything systemically this game has to offer already. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of depth there. That's kind of my feeling. I mean, I have played a little bit more than you have. Because I sort of said, I think you've seen everything by this far.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's going to be just some like pure like Power Fantasy editions. Like we'll probably get a grenade launcher or something at some point. That some more powerful weapon.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I feel like okay, well we've sort of seen everything systemically this game has to offer pretty early on, and it doesn't feel like those systems have a lot of depth to offer to me. I feel like choosing different progression stuff is interesting and customizes my experience, but it is, I feel, a game, and I think there's even an achievement, which is like get all the progress.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I think the expectation is you're going to, you could.
You're going to get over that hump, and it's just
you're going to get all the stuff, And I don't think it'll ever become easy because I think that he has shown himself to be really good at that, that fine line. But I don't think there's going to be tons of stuff. I did like having basically traps though to trap the zombies with. Either the bales of hay or a literal trap in a couple places where you can drop spikes from the ceiling and kill them. Did you find that?
Yeah, and you can also lure them into the preset traps, right?
Right, exactly.
So I've used that a couple times.
If you don't disengage them,
or
whatever, to get the crafting materials, you can use them.
So the last thing I'll mention, that another note that I wanted to mention level design wise, the village in level 3 that I just finished. For anyone who hasn't played Resident Evil 4, it's, as far as I'm concerned, the first village area in Resident Evil 4 that's, basically the start of the game, so it's easy to get to. One of my favorite and kind of well known for its level design of any survival horror game for sure, but also I think that particular section in RE4 was really what triggered people to really talk very positively about that game, because it really put all of the mechanics and systems all in one place, and you had more control over what you were going to be able to do as a player than ever before in a Resident Evil game specifically, but in most survival horror it wasn't just this linear hallway. There was a lot of different things you could do in that, and this village in this game that I just finished felt like that. It felt like, and it was a nice, change from the forest and the hospital.
Right. I would agree with that.
You approach it in different areas, and there's a very dense space of options, which I really enjoyed.
You can sort of go to the right side of the village first, or the left side of the village.
You can meander around and find traps, and you can.
There's that doctor that you're supposed to help get through, and he's hiding out in a place. And I did that second, and went over basically to the left side of town first.
Yeah, me too.
You
can kill as many as you want.
Yeah, but exactly. Yeah, it does feel really good that way. And it feels very satisfying when you get that gate open. I was kind of disappointed I didn't get to keep the chainsaw. But
yeah, he just throws it away.
You're like, you don't even get to use it. If you're holding a different weapon, you run up and, it's like, oh, yeah, do the cutscene. So there's some stuff that I'm like, I missed out on the satisfaction. I definitely wanted to have that chainsaw. But yeah, I mean, good, tense game, and
I'm pretty impressed.
It's definitely, it reminds me a lot of Alien Isolation. Do you have a PS4?
I do not yet. I'm going to get a Pro though finally. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll send you my Alien Isolation.
I have it on Steam already. So.
Oh, you do? Oh,
yeah, I own it. I just need to play it.
I shouldn't give you anything because you'll never.
No, you'll never get it back. One thing on the level design point that I'm really always jealous of when I play a survival horror game that has some pretty good level design in it. the economy of use of level, level geometry and space in these games is just amazing. Like I spent
tight.
That whole level is just that one little village area, and took me forever, right? Slow and plotting, and you're
good. There's some good use of verticality as well. You know,
yeah. But it's like
stories and
making a shooter, you're blowing through that content. So fast, and it's it's so expensive to make, and the efficiency of this genre is really always impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting because I feel like, Doom is a super fast-paced shooter, and yet I felt like,
they find a good way.
Yeah, they find. I mean, it feels like you end up visiting areas a lot of times that you end up in similar spaces because now you've gotten a little bit of an ability, and you're able to get to a space that you had seen but couldn't, figure out how to get there, like a double jump or something like that. You kind of power up these different, navigation things.
It definitely can be done.
So you end up scouring the map to be like, how do I get up there? Yeah,
yeah, that's great. That's great level design. Yeah, I mean, it definitely can be done, and the dense, the shooters out there that have a really dense possibility space are definitely, some of my favorites, and so I really applaud that stuff. But when you have that speed, I need to check Doom out as well. I know I'm missing that one. I don't want to.
It reminds me when in Republic Commando we went and would put all this effort into these hero rooms, which were gorgeous. Remember Chris used to call them hero rooms, and nobody would look at them because there was no combat. Because we made them so beautiful that they were so expensive, we had to not have any combat in there. So players would just run through in our playtest, and we just stopped doing that. And here it just layers everything on top of each other. It is really tight.
It's interesting. This is idTech. I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I think well, you haven't played any idTech 5 games, I don't think, right? So Rage, the newest Doom, and this. Oh, and Wolfenstein. I mean, you haven't played any of those.
No, only.
So they definitely have a look. Like, you can tell an idTech 5 game, or I can anyway. I mean, they're very high resolution for one thing, because their streaming and decompression technology is really, really good. I think it wasn't as great on Rage because there just wasn't enough speed to get stuff off the drive on a PS3 or an Xbox 360. But with this generation and their sort of mega texturing stuff, I mean, I could recognize one at this point, having played a few. So there's definitely something there. There's Wolfenstein is another one I would highly recommend.
Yep.
Great and wacky, and doing some really impressive stuff. I can't wait to play Machine Game's next kind of big game, because they did a sort of DLC. I think it was independent, but it was basically based on Wolfenstein.
Yeah, they have a follow up to that.
Yeah, and a little bit shorter, $20 rather than $60 or whatever. And I didn't play that, but I really enjoyed, the whatever it was called, the New Order. I think
it was New Order. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really impressive stuff, and but it, it definitely, you're like, oh yeah, that's totally idTech looking, which is weird. It's weird. It's weird that it's less, it feels less about art design. It's just because of what, you can tell an Unreal game, in different generations too, I guess. So it's not surprising. But anyway. All right. You got anything more?
One quick thing to mention. I think it's early to tell because I've only played the 3 chapters, but it feels like Resident Evil-ish character design. Not necessarily the main guy, but like Joseph, that other detective that was with you in the beginning, kind of a weird character, creepy character, and I see some tropes of some of the themes of the way that he kind of deals with characters. And there's the mysterious. There's the patient that's escaped.
Yeah, you're sort of chasing after. Yeah, whose doctor you're.
Leslie, saving. I think is his name. Yeah, and
And then the stranger who...
Yeah, with the hood. Just there's it's just reminiscent enough of Resident Evil where I feel like I'm playing a Resident Evil game, And
yeah, that's fair enough.
That Joseph guy kind of reminds me of Wesker a little bit, and so
yeah. Well, he's got glasses, right?
I'm sure he's gonna, he's obviously gonna come back in some.
Yeah, he does. I'm probably, now that I think about it, I'm like trying to figure out like, okay, what are the level chunks like? What are the locations and what levels do they correspond to? So I think I'm in level 6 or so.
Oh,
excuse me. And there is a little bit of sort of companion mechanics. Like you run into these characters, but then they're with you.
Interesting.
And there's a great scene where the woman detective from the car ride over to the hospital is locked into some kind of device, and you've got to deal with a bunch of enemies before some timer runs down, and some environmental stuff. It's basically, find the buttons to turn this off, so that she can get out. But then it reasserts itself as having Silent Hill, elements, because things happen that you're just like, that doesn't make a lot of physical sense. And so, which is a thing I love. So it doesn't bother me in the least, but it is just kind of like you go, whoa, that was weird. Like, how does that happen? So I do. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff here to love, and I know you haven't played a Silent Hill game, but I think had you'd be like, oh, I see the Silent Hillness in some of this stuff. But yeah, those characters come back, and you kind of sort of escort them. They sort of work with you. It's kind of a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, good for them.
So yeah, that's the Evil Within.
Evil Within, the modern...
better than I expected.
Yep, modern day Resident Evil. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's not do a break because it's going to be kind of a short episode overall. We did have a little bit. Well, maybe not. It's already 40 minutes. Let's do a few pieces of feedback. We have a few. I did the Yay Us stuff last week, just myself, because we had a little technical difficulty. But there were a few things to discuss between the two of us. So, one, on Twitter, our friend Battle Tank Bob, who I believe we've talked about on the podcast before, had a series of tweets which said, you speak on Resident Evil's controls with reference to using the analog stick. But, remember, this game was designed before analog sticks were on console, before the PS1 dual analog controller. You may touch on this, but I'm commenting while still in the middle of the episode, so sorry if you do. And I will say I totally forgot that.
Yeah, me too.
Entirely. No, I had no clue about that, and that is our omission, I think. But yeah, that totally changes what you would do with the controls if you didn't have sticks.
That's rough. Ooh.
Yeah. And in fact, I would have played it that way. No, I don't know if that's true. I don't remember how the GameCube control worked as far as looking. I feel like that weird C stick was. I honestly don't remember.
It was the same way because you don't control the camera, so I think it was just
right. It was the same way.
Yeah, it was the same basically. You don't need C stick to do anything.
Right. I think you. I don't remember how it worked. But yeah, that is a great
that's a good point, and that that's
we blew it on that one.
But that doesn't sound very fun to me.
I mean, I played.
Yeah,
I played. I want to say Final Fantasy VII was this way. If you played it on the PS1, and I mean, I played it on the PS2, and I had the sticks, and they sort of had some stick stuff in there, but there was some stuff that they hadn't implemented. I don't think they used the right stick for stuff. And so you had, in the overworld, you had to use like the shoulders to turn around, and I don't remember if that was also true of 9. But it sort of felt weird, when you're used to using a couple of things. Anyway, so thank you, Bob. We regret the error and frankly, total oversight. The other email we had about Resident Evil was from Robin Sakai, who I had mentioned a couple episodes ago because he had sent a rather longer email, and I hadn't taken the time to sort of cut it down to the essence. So this is a little edited for time. But he says, obviously a lot of games draw visual and story inspiration from movies, but in this case, I think it might be interesting for you to look a little more at how Resident Evil is almost an interactive movie more than a game. It always seemed clear to me that the appeal was very much in taking part in a movie, and the game system was to be endured as best as possible. In the original PlayStation version, all cutscenes were actually film sequences, which was something we've talked about. These actors are introduced in a pre-title sequence, similar to what a number of TV dramas used to do in the 80s and 90s. In the Japanese version of the game, voice acting is performed in English with Japanese subtitles, mimicking the experience of seeing a Hollywood movie in Japan, where likewise most of the showings are in the original English with Japanese subtitles. I also feel that using the door opening sequences, which act as load screens, also serve to break up parts of the game into scenes rather than levels. And then one more point for now, the first special edition of this game, which came out a year or so after it was first released, was called the Director's Cut. So, some thoughts there. I think there's a good case to be made that it was imitating film genre more than game genre.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he makes a funny point there that the game systems are, I forget what he said, but meant to be endured. Yeah. And I mean, it's really a pretty true statement. It doesn't seem like the kind of game where that was front and center the priority. It was more, and we did talk about this some, we mentioned Metal Gear to some degree as well, where Kojima, being a frustrated filmmaker, self-proclaimed, etc., as well, and yeah, I think he's making a good point. I think they probably had a different mentality going into it, and didn't realize what they had. They didn't realize they were creating a genre while they were doing this. They were just trying to make an interactive TV show, kind of a blockbuster kind of mentality. But little did they know, they were also, creating a genre.
Yeah, creating something that was going to lead to more entries,
and years later. And then it was their own thing, despite them wanting to basically emulate another medium and kind of and lean on that. They ended up finding something different, which I think is a cool part of the story of the genre.
It also reminds me of some. You'd almost call them augmented reality games today. But do you remember, in the would have been maybe the mid '80s, there was like a book and a movie where you were supposed to find this gold unicorn somewhere in the U.S., and there was like puzzles
vaguely
in this book. I don't remember what it was called.
Kind of an ARG kind of thing, right?
Yeah, an ARG, exactly. And it was like the proto ARG.
Yeah.
And you were supposed to watch the video, which was like 20 minutes or whatever, and pick up as many clues as you could, and then have the book. And there was this unicorn buried somewhere, and if you could find it, I think it was a unicorn. If you could find it, it was worth X, $10,000 or something, which was a lot of money back in those days. You could buy like 2 computers with that. And I remember I had a group of friends who were really into that, looking at that and poring over it and getting nowhere because it was very obtuse. But it had a very similar feel to this because it had cheesy video, it had with not even D-list actors, it was like the Room level. It was just terrible acting, but the idea of being part of this and there being a real thing in the world, but also just like these sort of puzzles that were kind of tacked on to this story they were trying to tell. Just I don't know, it reminds me something of this in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway,
it's a different time.
Yeah,
sure.
it definitely was, and we're still figuring this stuff out, and maybe we still haven't. Anyway, thank you, Robin. I was glad to finally get around to trimming that down to the real essence of what I think you were after. So thanks for writing in. And then finally, Greg Naughton, who is actually at id, wrote in about Fallout. He said, I just discovered your show. Someone where I work mentioned Brett's appearance on Gama Sutra, which I think I mentioned last time. He merely referred to it as in an interview, a lead from Skyrim, when asked what's the best language to learn, said English. After watching that interview, which I liked, I found your podcast. Fallout stuff blew me away. Literally, it's such an in-depthy analysis in a psychological way of game concepts which are a bit nebulous. And it's also one of my favorite games as well. I also watched Tim Kane's GDC talk. Between the two, I have a much better grasp on what went into making that game than I ever had before. Of course, I'm chomping at the bit to play it again when I get time. Fallout, like a fine wine, seems to get better with age. Or at least my appreciation for it is still growing over the years as I learn more about it. He goes on, I've been in an RPG mood lately. After some looking around other places, I stumbled on Underrail. I'm wondering, Brett, if you mentioned this in an episode. I thought you said Undertale, which is also a game you could easily have been referring to. And editor's note here, it was. I had heard of Underrail, but that's not what I referred to. Any case, he says, but if you haven't checked out Underrail, I suggest taking a look. Although I'm only starting it, it has a lot of things going for it, namely the engine, and 90% of the game were written by one Serbian developer over the period of 7 years, if I'm understanding that correctly. One guy! It is in some ways a more spiritual successor to Fallout than Troika's games. And he says, but that remark might be a little controversial. So, I won't go into... I mean, we're adding a whole bunch more games if we go into Troika, in terms of follow-ups to Fallout.
Yeah.
But I have heard of Underrail. I can't remember where I read about that. Sorry, I'm loosening Velcro. I did mention Undertale, but it's nice to get some more feedback on Fallout too.
Yeah, I've heard of Underrail from another podcast. Might have been Giant Bomb or something. But it sounded interesting, and I know it had been a long time coming. So I'm going to go seek it out, at least just to look it over a little bit. Yeah,
it's worth. I mean, I am always kind of, and when we interviewed with those guys, with Tim and Leonard, I felt like we got a real sense of how much of themselves were in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And part of why I read this and mentioning Underrail was that, that's a game that is almost entirely from one person, and so he can't help but put a lot of himself into the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of interesting. I wish I could remember where I read about it. I feel like it might have been in Kill Screen or something, because that tends to find some obscure stuff. But yeah, anyway, that's our feedback.
Cool.
All right.
Good stuff.
Yeah, last thing is what we're playing next. I mentioned it last week in a segment I did all by my lonesome. But we're going to play TIE Fighter.
Oh, boy.
Yep. And we followed up and looked into it, and it's, of course, longer than we remember. In my case, I think that's because I may have never actually finished the original TIE Fighter. And in Tim's case, I don't know why he didn't tell me it was going to be like a 300-hour game. I'm kidding. It's not 300 hours.
It's not 300, and I didn't remember that it was so long. I do remember it took me a long time when I was younger and when I did play it, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's broken up into, I believe, 13 battles, and each battle has multiple missions. So I think there are some that are also optional. I don't know. I think some of the Empire stuff, working for the Emperor and whatever that group is called. I think
the Emperor's Hand.
The Emperor's Hand. I think some of that stuff might be optional. Anyway, we're going to do the first 3 battles. So dig out your joysticks. The game's available on Steam, and it requires a joystick. There are probably ways around that to use like a controller, but my memory of this game is that it felt pretty good with a joystick in your right hand, if you're right-handed, and then using your left hand on the keys. I'm also going to try to dig out my original CD, which did not force you to a joystick, had keyboard controls, keyboard and mouse as well. But I know that that's going to be the inferior experience. This might have been the first flight action-y game I ever played. I'm pretty sure I played this when I came to LucasArts, at Darren Stinnett's urging. So I'm looking forward to diving in again. I don't know if you. You must have played XVT with the test department and stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, XVT was the first other than Mortimer. XVT was the first game I tested when I started.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
So I was on the test team for X-Men vs. TIE Fighter. Worked over there with Larry at Totally Games, off and on because we were across the street, so we would go back and forth. But no, X-Wing. The first X-Wing was the first one I played before I was in the industry, back as a youngster. Well, maybe it was college, maybe it was high school, I forget. But yeah, on PC I played, Chuck Yeager and some of those older flight sim, a little bit of action thrown in there. But X-Wing, man, whew, that was it. X-Wing was the game.
That was the game, huh?
Wow, yeah, the gore shading and the polygonal X-Wings flying through space, just blowing my mind. But yeah. I definitely, TIE Fighter is the refinement, and it's the right one to play if you're going to go back. So I think we made a good choice there, and it's appropriate, as you probably mentioned last episode.
Yeah, I think
Rogue
I did.
One influence. So
Rogue One is coming out. Should come out right in the middle of our discussions of this. We're right about. We'll probably be maybe in the third week of talking about this. So we'll finish it off just in time, for New Year's, and then we'll have to think about resolutions for next year, like finish all these games that we've been starting playing as a result of being interested, having played the old ones. Anyway, you can find us. Thank you for your feedback. You can find us at DevGameClub on Twitter, or devgameclub@gmail.com. We are, we like to read the iTunes reviews on the show. Didn't have any new ones this week, and trying to keep it short anyway, so, thanks for not going too crazy. But, when you're sitting down and having a thankful moment over the next few days for Thanksgiving, go ahead and throw us those 5 stars and let us know what you think as a way to thank us for our efforts on your behalf, for your joy and meaning and information. In the meantime, too, you can find me at Brett_Duville on Twitter, and him at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And I'll be sitting back with some turkey and pie in a couple of days. How about you?
Yeah, a veggie turkey, but we will be doing all the fixins. Just the 3 of us this year. So
okay,
laying low.
That sounds good. Yeah, that's something I would like to do someday. All right. Thanks very much, and good night.
Good night.
Hi, Brett here. A couple of things I meant to mention in our feedback section. It's a time of Thanksgiving, and so I wanted to put a little bit of gratitude out there. The first is to my friend Chris Sulentrop and his co-host JJ Sutherland of the Shall We Play a Game podcast. I was on there recently, and we talked about Skyrim a little bit in the wake of its remastered release, what it's like playing games as a developer, and a handful of other topics. I believe that podcast episode is coming out on the same day as this one, so it should be available. That was a good conversation, about 45 minutes. The other is to Chris Metzen, whom I don't know, but who recently appeared on a podcast called The Instance to talk about his recent departure from Blizzard Entertainment after 23 years there. Metzen really helped shape the experiences and games we've had from that company for so long that it's hard to imagine him not being there. He talks about some of the emotional costs that working in the industry can take and how he's now found balance and happiness in retirement. I found a lot that I identified with in the interview and thought that others might as well. So take a look and see if you can track that one down as well if you're interested. And then finally, I wanted to thank you, our listeners. It's really gratifying to both Tim and I that we have found an audience, and we really appreciate having opportunities to interact with you. So thank you for your emails and reviews and tweets and what have you. So for those of you in the U.S., we're hoping you're having a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll be in your ears again next week. Cheers.